there's so many things that we have to do in order for us to be better. And it starts with, we have to want it. Like, enough with the talking, enough with the, Perk, what do you make of his post-game comments?
Well, what's Giannis' excuse?
A little over halfway through this season, the Milwaukee Bucks were 10-13, tied for the second best record in the entire NBA. The franchise seemed secure with superstars Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard in tow, and quality role players in the rotation. But even while consistently winning, the Milwaukee Bucks felt the aura around the team wasn't positive, with constant defensive lapses. So strongly, in fact, that they stunned the NBA world by firing their first-year head coach Adrian Griffin. But since replacing Griffin with veteran coach and NBA champion Doc Rivers, their season has taken a turn for the worst. The Milwaukee Bucks have gone 3-7 since Rivers officially took the reins, and while he's helped improve some defensive areas, Milwaukee has suffered crushing losses since his arrival. Is this just an early bump in the road for a coach having to acclimate on the fly, or is this a harbinger of what's to come next in Milwaukee? Before we get to the content, we're on the grind to 900k subscribers. We're about 5,000 away, so make sure you're subscribed if you aren't. And now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. My Super Bowl picks that I made in my content with the Patrick Mahomes free square didn't hit, but the one that I posted onto my story did hit, and you guys let me know how much money you made in my DMs. And now that the NFL season's over, we're officially directing our attention to the NBA. I give away my picks for free at TheFlightMike on Instagram, and right now when you sign up for Prize Picks, use promo code FlightMike to get up to a $100 deposit match when you sign up on Prize Picks. Or you can just use my link in the description down below. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mike check 1212. What's going on, everybody? After winning the 2021 NBA Finals, the Milwaukee Bucks failed to get out of the second round in each of the next two postseasons, and last year's was the most disappointing to date. After finishing with the best record in the league last season, the Milwaukee Bucks were stunningly upset in the first round, losing in 5 games against the 8th-seeded Miami Heat, who were a play-in team that went on to advance to the NBA Finals. Even though Giannis Antetokounmpo went down in Game 1 and missed the next 2 games, this was a brutal loss for a team with serious championship aspirations and expectations. As a result, the Milwaukee Bucks felt a change was needed. A little over a week after being eliminated on their own home floor, Milwaukee fired coach Mike Budenholzer after a 5-year run with 2 years and about $16 million left on his deal. By month's end, the Milwaukee Bucks had decided on their next coach, longtime NBA assistant Adrian Griffin. Giannis met with each of Milwaukee's top 3 head coaching candidates, and he strongly advocated for Griffin to be hired over Nick Nurse, who ended up in Philadelphia. But even after getting the coach he wanted, Giannis still spent the offseason giving strong warnings that he wasn't completely satisfied with the organization. He stated that winning another championship is his primary goal, even if it wasn't in Milwaukee. Giannis said it didn't make sense to sign an extension, saying the summer of 2024 would make more sense, but even then, he still didn't know. The Milwaukee Bucks accomplished the biggest pieces of their offseason agenda, re-signing both Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez. They added more shooting as well by signing Malik Beasley, and yet Giannis was still leaving the door wide open to eventually leave Milwaukee. Feeling the need to make a massive move in order to win over their superstar, the Milwaukee Bucks went out and traded for another. In a massive 3-team deal that nobody saw coming, Milwaukee acquired Damian Lillard from Portland, losing Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, and 3 years of draft control, and that did the trick. Right before the season began, Giannis signed a 3-year, $186 million extension. The Bucks had secured their franchise centerpiece, tying him to the team until at least 2027, when he'd have a player option. But while their long-term future was secure, their short-term future was already showing signs of trouble. A few days prior to the big extension, assistant coach Terry Stotts abruptly resigned from the team. An incident at shoot-around in front of the entire team, in which Griffin yelled at Stotts to join a coach's huddle, is what reportedly led to Stotts' departure. And this is significant. Terry Stotts not only had 13 years of head coaching experience, but 9 of those seasons coaching was with Damian Lillard in Portland. This underscored the complex dynamics of employing a first-year coach trying to make his own imprint on a team with massive expectations that were raised even higher after the Damian Lillard trade. It only took a couple of weeks into the season for Griffin's coaching to be second-guessed. Milwaukee began the season getting torched at the defensive end, giving up at least 114 points in each of their first first 4 games. Losing defensive ace Drew Holiday in exchange for an offensive superstar in Lillard may have played some part in that, but the players didn't feel like they were using their personnel correctly. For example, they used to have Brook Lopez pressuring ball handlers on the perimeter off screens instead of playing closer to the basket where his shot blocking ability could be better utilized. The players came to Griffin to ask him to change their defensive approach to something that more resembled what they ran with Coach Bud. Brook Lopez played more in the paint in their next game against New York, and Milwaukee held the Knicks to a season-best 105 points in a win. That sparked a stretch of 8 wins over the next 10 games before Griffin's leadership was tested publicly again. In a late November game in Boston, Griffin subbed out Giannis Antetokounmpo throughout the third quarter, which led to this heated exchange between coach and his star by the scorer's table. Griffin downplayed the incident after the game, which the Bucks lost by 3, explaining that he wanted to give Giannis a breather and said he told him to stay at the scorer's table for 1 possession before re-entering. But afterwards, the Bucks got back to winning. They went 12-2 over their next 14 games with Giannis and Lillard regularly carrying the offense to big scoring nights, but they still didn't have good answers on defense. A 2-week stretch from Christmas to early January saw Milwaukee go 3-5 with the Bucks giving up at least 120 points in all but 2 of those games. After a loss in Houston, Giannis ripped the team's defense, saying they had no pride or effort. The loss of Holiday's defense was big, but they still had Giannis, who won Defensive Player of the Year in 2020, and Brook Lopez, who finished as the runner-up for the award last season. The next night, they'd get blown out at home against Utah after trailing by 31 points at halftime. They rattled off 3 straight wins to get back on track, thanks largely to their offense, including a dominant win over the Celtics, although they had just beaten Minnesota in overtime the previous night. But what followed was a week that encapsulated their season to that point and ultimately would spell doom for Adrian Griffin. The Bucks came into Cleveland against a Cavs team that was finding their groove on a 5-game winning streak while missing 2 starters. Giannis didn't play because of a shoulder injury, and without him, Milwaukee looked horrible. Cleveland jumped out to a 22-2 lead and led by as much as 47 in a wire-to-wire 40-point blowout. The Bucks got a much easier opponent after the loss, with a pair of games in Detroit picking up 2 more wins. But even in victory, something seemed horribly off. The Pistons, owner of the league's worst record, scored 135 and 113 points in those games and stayed competitive for most of the night. Even after improving to 30 and 13, that was inexcusable and would be Adrian Griffin's final straw. On January 23rd, the Milwaukee Bucks announced that they had fired Griffin and named assistant Joe Prunty as the interim head coach. Winning regular season games wasn't good enough for Griffin to keep his job, not when expectations revolved around competing for a championship. It was hard to see the Bucks doing that, with the team allowing over 120 points per game, which ranked 25th in the league, ranking just 22nd in defensive rating and forcing the fewest turnovers in the league. That's a far cry from last season when they ranked 14th in points allowed and 4th in defensive rating. After the move, general manager John Horst explained why the team chose to fire Griffin.
This was obviously a difficult decision. Adrian is a great person, brought a lot to the franchise. We're thankful for that, and I'm thankful for the time that we had with him. But we also believe that we had an opportunity now with a special group, the talent on this team. The dynamic of the team has changed. The team itself had changed from when we hired him, and we felt like we had an opportunity to improve and to get better. And we wanted to take advantage of that opportunity. I also would say that we believe that this is a good team right now, and with improvements, we have a chance to be great. We're looking for a way to really make this a great team.
And almost instantaneously, Doc Rivers became the name most linked to the Bucks' job, and a day after the firing, reportedly agreed to become their next head coach. The Bucks believe Doc Rivers' experience coaching superstars, along with his championship pedigree, would be better suited than a first-year head coach learning as he goes. While Rivers assembled his staff, Prunty coached the team into a 2-game split against the Cavs and a big offensive win over the Pelicans. With the stage finally set for Rivers to take over ahead of a Western Conference road trip, Giannis gave his thoughts on the expectations he had for the upcoming change.
I hope, but from the little experience that I have, I don't assume and I don't expect that the moment he comes in, we go 5-0 or we go 10-0, whatever. Like, it's going to take time. Like, we're going to change our offense. Is our offense going to stay the same? Are we going to change our terminology? Are we going to change our adjustment defensively? Like this, are we going to change our practice plan? How practice is going to look? How should that going to look? All of those things, just like different coach, different routines for everybody. So it's going to take time. But
And just as Giannis Antetokounmpo foresaw, the Doc Rivers era was far from a 5-0 start. In a close game in Denver, they led by as much as 13, but fell short in Doc's first game against the Denver Nuggets. In Damian Lillard's return to Portland, they played another tight game before losing to the lottery-bound Portland Trail Blazers by 3 points, spoiling Lillard's return to Rip City. Doc finally got his first win as the Bucks head coach in their first game in February, rallying from a 25-point deficit to beat the Dallas Mavericks. Oddly enough, that win meant that Doc Rivers would get to coach the Eastern Conference All-Stars, leading to this awkward moment.
That is ridiculously bad. It really is. Well, Adrian's going to get some money, that's for sure, and a ring. You know, it's one of these quirky things. I think there should be a rule somehow that someone else does it other than me. Maybe I'll send my staff and I'll go on vacation. I'm going to run that by Adam Silver. I think he's Adam's a good man. I think he'll understand.
Looking for some payback in Utah, the Bucks blew a 19-point lead before getting outscored 40-13 in the fourth quarter on their way to a 15-point loss. Playing without Lillard in Phoenix, the Bucks lineup got even thinner when Chris Middleton went down with a sprained ankle in the first quarter. He ended up leaving the arena in a walking boot. Middleton hasn't played since the injury, and while he's not performing like the all-star he used to be, he's still been a vital player for the Milwaukee Bucks as their third leading scorer. Milwaukee lost that night to the Suns by 8. At the trade deadline, the Milwaukee Bucks attempted to address their subpar perimeter defense by trading Cameron Payne and a second-round pick to Philadelphia in exchange for Patrick Beverley. Yeah, I know. Okay? I get it. I know. Just bear with me. This reunited Patrick Beverley with Doc Rivers, who previously coached him with the Los Angeles Clippers, and added a toughness the team felt they were lacking. They also cleared a roster spot by trading Robin Lopez to Sacramento. That night, without Middleton and Lillard again, the Bucks lost Doc's home debut against Minnesota in a game that was essentially over in the third quarter. They got a chance to use the Hornets as their personal punching bag the next night with their best defensive performance of the season. However, their most impressive defensive performance would come in their next game against Denver. Leading for most of the game, Milwaukee held the Nuggets to just 95 points in an impressive win, torching the defending champs at both ends of the floor. Even though Denver's starting backcourt didn't finish the game because of injuries, it was a vital feather in Milwaukee's cap and an early signature win for Doc Rivers. After holding a team to under 100 points in a game once all season, the Bucks had done it twice in a row. Finally, there were concrete results showing improvement on the defensive end. All the Bucks had to do was beat a couple of shorthanded teams to head into the All-Star break with plenty of momentum. That should be easy, right? Well, as it turns out, the Milwaukee Bucks would have more trouble than most people anticipated, and the good vibes surrounding the team would do a complete 180. Facing the Miami Heat at home without Jimmy Butler, Terry Rozier, and Josh Richardson, the Milwaukee Bucks never led, trailing by as much as 31 points in a 123-97 loss. In their last game before the All-Star break in Memphis, against a team whose season has been utterly decimated by injuries, the misery continued. The scrappy Memphis Grizzlies were playing guys on 2-way and 10-day contracts, and they kept the game competitive all night long. Milwaukee had trouble guarding the ball to the point where they had to play zone defense for long stretches in an effort to contain the Memphis Grizzlies ball handlers. It wasn't nearly effective enough, and the Milwaukee Bucks were handed another L going into the All-Star break against a team averaging the fewest points in the NBA. After the game, Doc Rivers eviscerated his team's lack of focus.
First play, we gamble for the 50th time in the corner. Guy drives. We have to help, leads to a three. We come back in this on our set. Two guys forget what we're running. Then we miss the shot, and then nobody gets back. That's how we start out the third quarter. That tells you all you need to know about where our heads were. We had some guys here, and we had some guys in Cabo.
Whereas Gigi Jackson quite literally thanked Doc Rivers for the win.
Great credit to Doc Rivers and the Milwaukee Bucks, have Giannis and Dame.
At this point, the Milwaukee Bucks have fallen to third in the East with a 35-21 record overall, just 3-7 since Doc Rivers took over. Under Rivers, the defense has improved in some categories, such as 10th in defensive rating and in points allowed, but the team may have overcorrected as the offense has slipped since Doc's arrival. Under Rivers, they rank just just 24th in scoring and offensive rating, dropping their net rating to 19th in the league. Now, 10 games may not be a big sample size, especially when considering a head coach taking over a team mid-season, but the recent results have been concerning. This is a team that entered the season tied for the highest over-under wins projection and tied for the third best championship odds. Doc's addition was supposed to give this team new life on the defensive end, but those improvements have seemingly been offset by a lack of identity and offensive regression. There is hope that a team boasting superstar talent will turn the season around as the organization continues to shape the roster in Doc's image. Ahead of the All-Star break, Milwaukee signed Danilo Gallinari for the rest of the season, adding a much-needed option at forward who could see the court during the playoffs. He passed up opportunities to sign with other contenders for a chance to play for Doc Rivers again after playing 2 seasons with him on the Los Angeles Clippers, the second time the Bucks have acquired a player with their coach in mind. But if they had trouble guarding the Memphis Grizzlies ball handlers, how will they fare in the playoffs against significantly better competition? The Bucks are just 18-8 against teams with losing records, a far cry from the other top 4 teams in the East who regularly win against teams they're supposed to beat. No matter who the coach has been, overall, Milwaukee has been shaky at best this season against inferior competition. The Giannis-Dame pairing has been reliably healthy this season, and the worst thing an organization can do is waste a year of their championship window. That line of thought pushed the Bucks to fire Griffin, but if their record continues slipping under Doc Rivers, they will have done just that. Giannis and the team didn't expect to begin soaring under Doc initially, but these results are troubling. They'll have time to regroup during the break, but the situation is growing increasingly dire in Milwaukee, who could be overseeing yet another coaching disaster. Let me know in the comment section down below. Did the Milwaukee Bucks make a horrific mistake? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.